Welcome into the Commander's Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. We just got some really interesting news in the National Football League here as Dianna Russini and Mike Silver from The Athletic report that the 49ers are going to be heading towards a divorce with former All-Pro wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk this upcoming offseason, as Aiyuk has pretty much quit on the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to tell you why I think this is a gift that the 49ers are giving Adam Peters and the Washington Commanders, because I think there's a very high chance that Aiyuk will be a Washington Commander in 2026. I'll explain my reasoning why on today's show, but make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for more juicy Commanders rumors, updates all throughout the 2025 season, as well as the 2026 offseason, which is coming up here in just a few short months here. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for your daily dose of Commanders news and rumors. So let's get into this report, man, because it is very interesting. Obviously, just last offseason, the 49ers and Aiyuk came to terms on a massive 4-year extension that gave him a lot of guaranteed money. But this year, Aiyuk obviously has been rehabbing, coming off a very serious knee injury where he had to completely get his knee reconstructed after a really nasty injury last year. I believe it was versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and obviously had to miss the rest of last season. He hasn't played at all this year. Apparently, he's getting somewhat close to ready to play from a physical perspective. And the 49ers are actually still, maintaining hope that he could play this year. But according to Mike Silver, Aiyuk has no intention of ever playing for the San Francisco 49ers again. And he hasn't been attending meetings. He hasn't been attending team functions over the last several months. Apparently, teammates, coaches have tried to get in touch with him, and he has been silent, and he has been avoiding everything that has to do with the San Francisco 49ers organization. So because of that, the 49ers have voided the guarantees on his contract heading into the 2026 season because he hasn't been, pretty much doing the duties that he is required of with his contract, because he's not attending team meetings, he's not attending team functions. That is a requirement in his contract, and because of that, the 49ers believe they have grounds to take away his guaranteed dollars. And, Aiyuk is so desperate to, just move on from the 49ers that he isn't even challenging, what the 49ers are doing with the NFLPA. He's perfectly fine with parting ways with the San Francisco 49ers this offseason. So he will likely be a free agent in 2026, available for any team to pick up. And I do think, guys, that the heavy favorites should be the Washington Commanders. Now, I know there's going to be people in this fan base that are like, why would we want him? He's a big headache. He is a nutcase. He is, he's a diva, all these different things. And I won't even necessarily push back on those things. Adding a guy like Brandon Aiyuk to your locker room, I think it's been proven over the last couple of years with the way that he's behaved that it is a little bit of a risk. But obviously, the Commanders are trying to make the most of Jaden Daniels' rookie contract. And the fact of the matter is they have an inline road to sign this guy and to probably get him at a discount at that. He's only 27 years old. When he's been healthy, he's been one of the premier route runners in the National Football League. He's a former All-Pro, and he already has built-in chemistry with quarterback Jaden Daniels, because not only are those two literally best friends and hang out all the time during the offseason, but also they played with each other back in the day at Arizona State. They're former college teammates. So pairing a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, a former number one receiver in this league, up with Terry McLaurin, and essentially making Aiyuk this team's number 2 wide receiver heading into 2026, it would create, at least on paper, one of the more intriguing and potentially one of the best wide receiver duos in the National Football League. And I'm not sure if that is, I'm just not sure if that's an opportunity that Adam Peters, this team's GM, and Dan Quinn, this team's head coach, is going to want to pass up on. I can almost guarantee you Aiyuk is going to want to play for the Washington Commanders, and as long as the Commanders are in, I'm sure he might even be willing to take a little bit of a pay cut to come play for the Commanders, play with his friend Jaden Daniels, and try and win a Super Bowl here in Washington while Jaden is still on his rookie contract and he's not making a ton of money. I certainly think that is probably the most likely scenario. Now, it's possible that Aiyuk wants a lot of money on his next deal and the Commanders are not willing to give him that money, and that's just something that doesn't work out. But not only do the Commanders have the Jaden Daniels connection with Aiyuk, but also they have the Adam Peters connection, because of course Peters was in San Francisco when they drafted Aiyuk. He was there while Aiyuk and the 49ers were still on good terms. My guess is Aiyuk and Peters are still on really great terms. And I mean, I know he's still on great terms with Deebo Samuel. So it's possible that the Commanders might think about bringing back Deebo next year as well, get him on maybe a more team-friendly contract, and then you could theoretically have a wide receiver trio of Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and then instead of a guy like Noah Brown or somebody else that the Commanders have been, doing this rotation that they've had a receiver this year, you have Brandon Aiyuk, somebody that at least in theory could be, one of the better wide receiver twos in the National Football League, play for you moving forward. So, when you make the connections here, I think that it is, I don't even think it's a possibility. I think it's almost a likelihood at this point, because it certainly seems likely that the divorce between the 49ers and Aiyuk is going to be coming. And then, when I just look at the prospects for Aiyuk, the only thing that I could really see getting in the way of Aiyuk signing with the Commanders is either A, Aiyuk wants way too much money, or B, the Commanders aren't interested in adding the player and the person to the locker room. But I can pretty much guarantee you Jaden Daniels is going to be advocating to sign Brandon Aiyuk when he hits the open market next spring. And, I think certainly the mindset of Dan Quinn and Jaden and Adam Peters is to make their star quarterback happy and to have the guys that he wants in that wide receiver room. And, as long as, Aiyuk isn't asking for too much money or the team just doesn't want to add a personality like that, I just don't see, too many things getting in the way of Aiyuk deciding to sign with the Washington Commanders in 2026. So, we've been talking a lot on this channel about how to potentially address the wide receiver 2 position heading into future seasons. We've talked about drafting a receiver. Certainly the Commanders are in position to maybe draft like a really good wide receiver, either in round 1 or in round 3. It's a very good wide receiver class in the draft next year. And we've certainly talked about other options on the free agency or even in the trade market. But, I just feel like this is going to be an opportunity that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels are not going to say no to. And we're going to have, a wide receiver room in 2026 that consists of the number 1 receiver being Terry McLaurin on obviously his new deal, and then probably Brandon Aiyuk on a somewhat team-friendly deal as this team's number 2 receiver. And then who knows, maybe they even bring back Deebo Samuel because he and Brandon are boys. And obviously, I think Deebo, he's actually pretty happy here in Washington. I think that he would come back for another season here in Washington if given another opportunity. And then certainly the Commanders could continue to look towards the future, maybe draft a receiver in the later rounds with one of their 4 day 3 draft picks, and still have an eye on the future. But I still think the Commanders are going to continue to try and win and try and compete and try to win now heading into next offseason. And signing Aiyuk, certainly if you can get him at a discount, would be a huge addition for this team. Now, obviously, the concerns are, is he healthy? Will the injury affect the way that he can, move and run routes and be an effective football player? All those things are legitimate concerns. And then also the behavioral and personality concerns are certainly reasonable. But I feel like if there's any team in the league that Aiyuk would behave with, it would be with the Commanders, because he wouldn't want to jeopardize what he has with Jaden Daniels. He wouldn't want to jeopardize his chance to play with his best friend and try and win a Super Bowl with him. So I actually think, this is a marriage that could potentially work out for the Commanders, getting a former All-Pro receiver who is one of the better route runners in the league. If Terry McLaurin goes down with an injury next year, you can trust, or theoretically trust, Aiyuk to step in and be that number one receiver. That's been a big issue with this Commanders offense this year, is that with Terry McLaurin getting injured, they haven't had anybody really capable of taking up that number one receiver mantle. So that this would certainly, at least on paper and theoretically, fix that issue. And, if I'm the Commanders, I'd probably just sign him to a one-year deal. And then if he plays well, just give him an extension. If he earns it, I would certainly be open to that. So I think that the 49ers may have just given the Washington Commanders a huge gift, which will be potentially Brandon Aiyuk coming to the Washington Commanders in 2026. So I think that this is something that honestly is likely to happen. So whether you like that or not, I think that that is something that just makes a ton of sense for both Brandon and for the Commanders. And honestly, I'd be pretty excited about it if we see that happen next season. So let me know what you guys think. Would you be in favor of bringing in Brandon Aiyuk? Would you be excited? Do you think that he would work out here in Washington next to Terry McLaurin with Jaden Daniels throwing him the football? It's certainly, an interesting idea, and I actually think it might work. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. We'll have another Commanders video come out tomorrow for you guys. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button to never miss a video.